She had $9 and a pie recipe her grandmother wrote on the back of an electric bill in 1971. That was everything Dora Mae Cousins had left on the morning of April 3rd, 3 years after her husband Calvin died on a Tuesday in February, 6 days before their youngest daughter turned 8. $9 in the mason jar on the counter, a handwritten recipe she could not bring herself to throw away, and a porch that faced Elm Street in Tullahoma, Georgia, a city of just under 40,000 people who had no idea what was about to walk out of that house and change what they thought they knew about a sweet potato pie. She had not planned to sell anything. She had planned in the weeks after Calvin's funeral to disappear quietly into the work of keeping 3 children fed and a mortgage current on a home health aide hourly wage, which was $11.60 at the time. She had planned to be invisible and efficient. She had planned to grieve privately and function publicly, which is what the women in her family had always done. It was a Thursday in April, and she had $9, and she had 3 mouths to feed before the weekend, and the refrigerator had sweet potatoes going soft at the bottom of the crisper drawer, and her grandmother's voice came back to her as clearly as if the old woman was standing in the kitchen beside her. Dora Mae. There is not one thing wrong with them potatoes that a little butter and brown sugar and a good hot oven can't fix. So she baked. She did not rush. She peeled the sweet potatoes over the kitchen sink while the pre-dawn dark sat behind the window and the house was quiet in the way it was only quiet at that hour, before Clem's alarm went off, before the pipes in the hallway started to knock. She boiled the potatoes in the big pot and mashed them with butter, and she measured the brown sugar the way her grandmother had taught her, which was to fill the cup and then add a little more because a little more was almost always right. She grated the nutmeg by hand. She cut the butter into the filling in small pieces and worked it in with a fork, and the kitchen filled with a smell that was warm and deep and old in the way that good smells are old, carrying something behind them beyond the ingredients. She made 2 pies that first morning using ingredients she had on hand, and 4 of her $9 spent at the corner store for a stick of butter and a box of brown sugar. She set 1 pie on the kitchen table for her children. She looked at the second pie for a long time. Then she carried it out to the porch. She did not have a sign. She put the pie on the folding table Calvin had used for yard sales and set a handwritten index card beside it that said, "Sweet potato pie, $5." And she went back inside to get the girls ready for school. By the time she came back to the porch, the pie was gone. A folded $5 bill sat on the table, anchored by a rock from the garden. She did not know who had bought it. She stood on that porch for a long time, looking at the $5 bill and the empty foil tin. And something shifted in her chest that was not grief and not joy, but something quieter and older than both. She went back inside and checked her recipe card and counted what she had left in the pantry, and she started doing math in her head. If she stretched carefully, she could make 2 pies a day, 5 days a week. At $5 each, that was $50 a week. That was not enough to live on. That was not even close. But it was $50 more than the porch had been giving her before. She kept her job at the home health agency. She got up at 4:30 every morning so the pies would be out of the oven and cooling by the time her daughters had to leave for school. She set the table on the porch before she left for her shift, covered the pies with a clean dish towel against the spring dust, and trusted her neighbors, which was a thing she had always done. They trusted her back. They paid. They left the money under the same rock. They told their cousins and their co-workers and the woman who cut their hair. Within 3 weeks, Dora Mae was selling out every day. She raised the price to $6 because she was running short of tins. She sold out still. Her oldest daughter, Renee, was 14 that spring, old enough to run the porch table on Saturdays when Dora Mae worked a morning shift. Renee kept a spiral notebook with every sale written down in blue ink because Renee was her father's daughter. And Calvin had believed that the only thing between a good idea and a good life was good records. By June, the notebook showed that Dora Mae had sold 216 pies since the first Thursday in April. She did not know that one of the people who bought a pie was a man named Jerome. Jerome Whitfield was 47 years old that spring, and he was the kind of man who was used to people knowing his name before he introduced himself. He had spent 20 years building a regional bakery and cafe chain called Harvest Table, which had 63 locations across the South and was widely understood in the food service industry to be 18 months away from a national expansion that had been discussed in trade publications and on at least 2 financial news broadcasts. He was tall and heavy-set, with close-cropped salt-and-pepper hair and a face that was harder to read than it looked from a distance, and he had a weekend house 20 minutes outside Tullahoma that he used 4 or 5 times a year to decompress from Atlanta, which was where Harvest Table's main offices were. He had driven past Dora May's porch on a Saturday morning in May, on his way to pick up hardware store supplies, and the word pie handwritten on an index card in a woman's careful print had made him slow the truck. He bought a slice. He ate it in the truck in the parking lot of the hardware store because he had not intended to eat it right away, but the smell was unreasonable. He sat there a long time after the slice was gone. He drove back to Elm Street. He knocked on the screen door. A 14-year-old girl with her mother's eyes and a spiral notebook under her arm answered. "Is your mother home?" he said. "She's at work," Renee said. "I'm handling the porch today. You want a whole pie? Last one's $6. Jerome bought the last pie. He asked the girl her mother's name, which Renee told him, and he asked her to write it in the notebook so he would remember it, which Renee did, in blue ink, because she was thorough about such things. He drove back to Atlanta with the pie on the passenger seat and called his head of product development from the highway. The product development director's name was Dennis, and he had worked with Jerome for 11 years, and he was accustomed to receiving unusual instructions without being given reasons for them. Jerome told him to clear his calendar for a tasting on Monday morning. Dennis said he would. Jerome told him not to bring the test kitchen team yet, just the 2 of them, and Dennis said all right. Then Jerome said he was sending something ahead and that Dennis should wait until Monday to open it, and Dennis agreed, though later he admitted to having opened it Sunday evening because the smell had been present through the sealed bag and through the cardboard box and had eventually become impossible to ignore. The slice Dennis ate standing in his kitchen on Sunday night was the one that started the 4-month question Jerome would sit with before he sent the letter. This is the part Dora May did not know. She did not know that Jerome Whitfield had built Harvest Table on exactly one conviction, which was that the recipes that moved people were the ones that belonged to someone who had no intention of making them for anyone but their own family. She did not know that he had spent 2 years and more money than he cared to name trying to develop a sweet potato pie for the national expansion menu, and that his test kitchen had produced 17 different versions, and that he had rejected all 17 because none of them tasted like the thing they were supposed to be reminding people of. She did not know any of that. She did not know that the problem with the 17 versions was not technique. The test kitchen was staffed by talented people who understood spice ratios and oven temperatures and the chemistry of how butter behaves at different stages of heat. They understood what a sweet potato pie was supposed to be. What they could not supply, because it was not something that lived in a kitchen or in a recipe card or in any combination of ingredients, was the specific weight of a life that had made that pie necessary. Jerome knew this. He had known it since the first version came out of the test kitchen and tasted like something assembled from the description of a thing, rather than the thing itself. He knew that no amount of technical precision would close the distance between a pie someone had learned to make from their grandmother's handwriting and a pie that had been calibrated in a laboratory. The only way to close the distance was to find the source. She was on her knees in Mrs. Bertram's living room on the west side of Tullahoma, easing a 91-year-old woman's compression socks on when Jerome's product development director was eating a slice of her pie from a styrofoam box in an Atlanta conference room, and not saying a word for almost a full minute. Dora May kept her head down and kept working. The morning shift at Mrs. Bertram's ran until noon, and the afternoon shift at a man named Gerald's house ran from 2 to 6. And in between she stopped at the corner store for the supplies she needed for the next morning's pies and picked up Clem from school on the days that Renee could not. She was in her kitchen by 6:30 most evenings, making dinner and laying out the ingredients for the morning so that 4:30 would not be any more complicated than it had to be. She graded the days by what went wrong and what did not. A day when Patrice made it to soccer practice and the porch sold out before noon and Gerald's insurance paid his October copay without requiring a second call was a good day. A day when Clem's sneakers fell apart on the way to school and she had to buy new ones from the discount rack at the back of a store on Maple was a harder one. She did not dwell on the harder ones. She moved through them and came out the other side and started the next morning. It was the way she had always worked. Through Calvin's first round of treatment, when the doctors in Macon said the word remission, and she allowed herself 3 days of something that felt like relief before learning what partial remission meant in practice. Through his second round, when she took on extra weekend shifts at the agency and let Renee start babysitting the neighbors' kids to cover the co-pays that the insurance company had decided were her responsibility to absorb. Through the winter after he died, when she went back to work 6 days after the funeral because the alternative was falling still. And Dora May had learned from her grandmother that stillness was a luxury that women in their family could not afford during the years when children depended on them. She had a second daughter named Patrice, who was 11 that summer, and a third, her youngest, named Clem, who was 10. Patrice was the quiet one, the one who did not need to be told things twice, and who sat at the counter doing her homework every evening with a focused stillness that Dora May recognized as her own. Clem was the loud one, the one who came down the stairs in the morning like weather, who had opinions about everything and held them loudly, who could make her mother laugh at 6 a.m. without trying. Clem had her father's laugh and a habit of leaving her shoes in the middle of the kitchen floor that Dora May had stopped trying to correct because correcting it felt like erasing the only daily evidence she had that Calvin had ever lived in that house. The three of them were the reason the pies went out every morning. Not just the money, though the money was real and necessary and tracked to the cent in Renee's notebook. It was the thing behind the money. The specific faces of 3 specific girls who needed breakfast and shoes and school supplies and eventually tuition for things Dora May refused to let herself think about yet because they were too far away and too large. And she had learned that the large things had to be approached from a distance, one small, faithful act at a time. The shoes stayed in the middle of the floor. The pies went out every morning. By August, Dora May was making 3 pies a day, Monday through Friday, and 4 on Saturday. Renee had redesigned the index card into a proper sign on a piece of poster board. The price was $8. They had a tin specifically for the money and a tin specifically for the rock because 2 things on one tin had started to feel imprecise. And Renee was very particular about precision. The neighborhood knew the Porch by now. People came from 3 streets over. A woman named Beverly, who managed the lunch counter at a hardware store on Route 9, had bought a pie every week since June and was widely rumoured to have consumed most of them by herself on the drive home, which Beverly neither confirmed nor denied. Beverly had started parking at the curb rather than slowing and leaning out the window, which was progress. She and Dora May had begun exchanging a few words while the change was made, and Beverly had developed a habit of arriving exactly 12 minutes after the pies came out of the oven, which was not something Dora May had ever told anyone, but which Beverly claimed she could detect from a block away on a still morning. On the 3rd Saturday of August, Beverly showed up with a cousin from Birmingham named Nadine, who bought 2 pies and said nothing about them and drove back to Birmingham with both. And the following Tuesday, Dora May received a call from an unknown Alabama number and spent 17 minutes reassuring a woman she had never met that, yes, she could ship, and no, she had no idea yet how. She figured it out. She bought the right size boxes from the shipping store on 4th Street and learned that 2 days was the correct window for a sweet potato pie and drove to the post office before her morning shift 3 times in September. The shipping money went into the mason jar with the Porch money. Renee recorded it all. What none of them knew, and what Dora May would not find out until the 2nd week of September, was that Jerome had been sitting with the question of her pie for 4 months. He had eaten every slice his product team had run as a comparison study. He had sat in 3 different rooms while 3 different food consultants explained to him why the recipe could be approximated and reproduced at scale. He had listened carefully and disagreed quietly and sent them all home. He had a principle that he had explained to his board exactly once, which was that certain recipes were architecture, not engineering, and that you could not flatten the corners of a thing that was built from the inside out and call the result by the same name. He wanted to talk to the woman who had built it. He sent a letter. The letter was on Harvest Table corporate letterhead, and it was 2 paragraphs long. The first paragraph introduced him and the company, briefly. The second paragraph said that he had eaten her sweet potato pie in May and had not stopped thinking about it since, and that he would like, at her convenience and with no obligation, to have a conversation about whether there was a partnership that might benefit her. Dora May read the letter at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening in September, with Clem's shoes on the floor beside her chair and Patrice doing homework at the counter, and Renee in her bedroom studying for the PSAT. She read it twice. She set it down. She picked it up and read it a third time. She called her older sister Vonda in Memphis. "What's Harvest Table?" she said. Vonda looked it up on her phone while Dora May waited. "It's a chain," Vonda said. "Like a big chain. They've got, looks like 60-some locations. Southeast mostly. They're in Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, the Carolinas." A pause. "They've got really nice pies in the photos." Dora May said. Dora May. "I'm thinking." "What are you thinking about?" "Call the man." She called Jerome's office the next morning from the parking lot of the home health agency because she did not want to make the call from inside the house where the girls might hear and get ideas she would later have to walk back. She sat in the car for 5 minutes first, watching the parking lot, before she dialed the number on the letterhead. She had written the number out on a separate sheet of paper before she left the house, in case she lost the letter, which she did not lose. But having the backup felt like good planning, and good planning was how she got through days that were larger than she expected. She told the receptionist who she was. She was put on hold for less than 30 seconds. Jerome did not waste words. He said he had been in the food business for a long time, and he had eaten more pies than any person had a right to, and he had never in that time encountered a sweet potato pie that tasted the way hers did. He said he believed the reason was not a single ingredient or technique, but a combination of things that couldn't be disentangled and that he had no interest in trying to extract without her involvement. He said he wanted to know if she had any interest in being involved. She asked him what involvement would mean. He told her there were several possible structures, ranging from a licensing arrangement to a co-production partnership to something more significant, and that he did not want to pressure her toward any of them. He said he thought it would be better to meet in person. He said he would come to Tullahoma. She said that would be fine. If you have ever watched someone you love stand at the edge of something large and held your breath, you know what it was like in that house in the weeks before Jerome drove back down from Atlanta. Renee knew because Dora May told her, and Renee told no one except her notebook, in which she recorded the date of the phone call and the date of the scheduled meeting, and the phrase things could change without elaborating, because she understood, at 14, that hope needed to be carried carefully. Patrice did not know. Clem did not know. They just knew that their mother was baking more than usual in October, which was not unusual because October was pie season in Georgia, and the Porch was doing its best business. Dora May baked and waited and said her prayers in the kitchen before the sun came up, the way her grandmother had. October was the best month on the Porch. The air turned and people started wanting the things that meant warmth and end of year and going home, and a sweet potato pie was exactly that kind of thing. She was making 5 pies some days now, and Renee had taken over the Porch table entirely on Saturdays so Dora May could work a longer shift, and the mason jar on the counter had more in it than it had ever had. She did not spend the extra money. She had a habit from Calvin's illness, years of not spending anything that was not already planned for, because unplanned spending was what happened to your footing when the ground was uncertain, and she was not certain yet. She did not allow herself to be certain yet. She thought sometimes about what the man's letter had said and what it might mean, and then she reminded herself that letters were not contracts and intentions were not arrangements, and that the sensible thing to do was keep working until there was something signed and verified and real. That was what her grandmother would have told her. That was what Calvin would have told her. Keep working. Keep the faith. Don't spend what you haven't held. Jerome arrived on a Saturday morning in late October. He drove himself, which Renee noted. He was wearing a grey jacket and dark slacks, and he took his shoes off at the door because Dora May's grandmother had believed that shoes belonged outside of a clean house, and Dora May had never let go of that rule, and he did not hesitate when she gestured to the mat. Renee was watching from the hallway. Dora May made coffee. She set a pie on the table between them. It was a full pie, fresh from the oven, in a plain foil tin. She had not decorated it or done anything special to it. It was exactly the pie she made every morning for the Porch. Jerome looked at the pie for a moment. Then he looked at her. "Before we talk numbers," he said, "can I ask you something?" "Go ahead," she said. "Where did you learn this recipe?" She told him about her grandmother. She told him about the electric bill. She told him that her grandmother had baked pies every Sunday for 40 years for a church on the edge of a small town outside of Augusta, and that the women of that church had argued every October about whose sweet potato pie was best, and that her grandmother had won the argument every year for a decade, and then retired from the argument out of pity for the other women, which was a piece of family history that made Jerome laugh. A real laugh, the kind that surprised him. She told him that Calvin had loved the pie more than he loved almost any other thing she made, and that she had baked his birthday pie every year until she could not, and that the morning she made the pies in April, she had not been thinking about money or the porch or any plan at all. She had been thinking about him. Jerome was quiet for a while. He served himself a slice of pie and ate it slowly, in that same focused, unhurried way Renee had watched him eat the slice in the truck 5 months earlier, though she had not told her mother about that part. He put his fork down. "I'm going to tell you what I have in mind," he said. "And I want you to know that nothing I'm about to say is designed to take anything away from you. I've spent 25 years in this business, and I have learned the hard way that the one thing you cannot replace is where a thing actually came from." He told her about the national expansion. He told her about the 18-month runway. He told her that his test kitchen had failed to produce a sweet potato pie he believed in, and why. He told her that he wanted her recipe to be the centerpiece of the expansion's dessert menu, that he wanted her name on the packaging, and that he wanted to structure the arrangement as a true partnership, with a royalty on every pie sold, a one-time licensing fee, and a standing consulting role that would pay a monthly retainer, which he named. The monthly retainer he named was more than 3 times what she made at the home health agency. Dora May looked at the number he had written on the notepad he slid across the table. She looked at it for a long time. She did not say anything. In the hallway, Renee pressed her back against the wall and covered her mouth with her hand. "I need a lawyer to look at any agreement before I sign anything," Dora May said. "Of course," Jerome said. "I need to understand what the royalty rate means in practice. I'll have my team prepare a projection sheet, and I need it to be clear that the recipe stays mine, that if this arrangement ends, the recipe goes with me. I won't negotiate on that." Jerome looked at her across the table with an expression that was not surprise, but something close to recognition, as if he had expected exactly this and was glad to find it true. "Agreed," he said. "I'll put it in the first draft." She gave him her sister Vonda's number because Vonda was a paralegal in Memphis and was the closest thing in her family to a person who read contracts. She walked him to the door. He paused at the mat, put his shoes back on, and turned to her. "Mrs. Cousins," he said, "I want you to know that I drove down here today having already decided I wasn't going to leave without an agreement in principle. You should have seen the look on my product director's face when I told him what I was doing." "What did you tell him?" she said. "I told him I was going to go ask the woman who built the thing," he said. He drove back to Atlanta. Dora May stood on the porch a long time after his truck was gone, in the October cold, looking at Elm Street. A neighbor walking a dog waved at her. She waved back. She went inside. She called Vonda. She sat down at the kitchen table and looked at the half-eaten pie, and the 2 coffee cups, and the notepad with the number on it. Clem came downstairs in socks, no shoes, and said, "Mama, is somebody visiting?" "Somebody visited," Dora May said. "He's gone now." "Was it nice?" Dora May thought about that for a moment. "It was," she said. Clem opened the refrigerator, considered its contents, closed it again, and wandered back toward the stairs. Then she stopped. "Mama," she said, "there's still half a pie." "There is," Dora May said. "Can I have some?" "Get your sister," Dora May said. "Get both of them." The contracts took 6 weeks to negotiate, which was 4 weeks longer than Jerome was used to, because Vonda was methodical and careful and asked questions that made his legal team go back and revise 3 separate clauses. Dora May was grateful for every day of it. She kept working her shifts at the home health agency through November because she had not signed anything yet, and she did not change her life on a promise. She went to Mrs. Bertram's on Tuesdays and Thursdays and to Gerald's on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, and she pulled compression socks and measured medications and made sure the grab bars in the bathrooms were where they needed to be, and she did it at the same way she had always done it, with full attention and without hurry, because the people in those rooms had not changed, and she had not changed, and the fact that something large was pending in an Atlanta conference room did not reduce the weight of what was happening at the end of those Tuesday and Thursday hallways. She had learned a long time ago that the way you do the small thing while you're waiting for the large thing to resolve is the clearest picture available of who you actually are. She signed on a Friday in December in a conference room in Atlanta, with Renee and Vonda sitting beside her and Jerome's legal team across the table and a glass of water that nobody touched. The conference room was on the 14th floor and the Atlanta skyline was in the windows behind Jerome's attorney. and Dora May thought about the distance between the 14th floor of a glass office building and her kitchen at 4:30 in the morning, and how small that distance had turned out to be, measured in sweet potatoes and brown sugar and a grandmother's handwriting and 9 months of mornings when she had not stopped. She had a pen her grandmother had given her, a plain blue ballpoint that had lived in a kitchen drawer for years, which she had put in her coat pocket that morning without quite knowing why. Renee noticed the pen. She wrote it down in the notebook. She wrote down the date and the time, 10:47 in the morning, and she wrote the words partnership agreement and the word signed. And then she sat with the pen over the notebook for a moment before she wrote the word finally, which was the only editorial comment she had ever put in the notebook, and which she later crossed out and then uncrossed, because it was accurate, and accuracy was the point of the notebook, and she was her father's daughter. On the drive back to Tullahoma from Atlanta that afternoon, Renee sat in the back seat and did not say anything for a long time. Vonda drove. Dora May watched the highway. When they were 20 miles outside of the city, Renee leaned forward between the seats. "Mama," she said. "Yes." "Did Dad know you could do something like this?" Dora May was quiet for a moment. "I think," she said, "that he probably knew before I did." Renee sat back. She opened the notebook and wrote that down too. The Sunday after she signed, Dora May sat in her usual pew at Grace Tabernacle and did not cry, which she considered an achievement. She sat between Renee and Patrice with Clem on the end of the pew, and she listened to the morning sermon, which was about patience, and she thought about the word patience in a new way, not as something a person practiced, but as something a person became over time. The way iron becomes something different from ore after enough heat and enough pressure and enough time. She thought about the 4:30 mornings and the porch table and the rock and the mason jar and the shipping boxes and the blue ink in Renee's notebook, and she understood that all of it had been the patience she had been becoming, and that she had not recognized it while it was happening because she had been too busy doing it. After service, Beverly found her in the parking lot and grabbed her arm. "I heard something," Beverly said. "What did you hear?" Dora May said. "Somebody told me you made a deal with that Harvest Table Company. The chain." Beverly's eyes were wide. "I can't confirm or deny anything until the announcement," Dora May said, which was something Vonda had told her to say. Beverly looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Dora May Cousins, I've been buying your pies since April. I ate half of them in my car. I am your best customer." Dora May laughed, which was the first full laugh she had let herself have since the signing. "It's true," she said. Beverly grabbed her arm again, tighter. "Good," Beverly said. "Good for you. It's about time." The public announcement of the partnership came in January. Harvest Table issued a press release that named her as a home baker and home health aide from Tullahoma, Georgia, and credited her recipe as the foundation of the chain's new national dessert program. A local news station sent a camera to Elm Street. Dora May wore her work clothes and stood on the porch. She did not perform anything. She answered the reporters' questions directly and concisely and said that her grandmother would have found the whole situation funny and also would have told everyone at the interview that her pie was still the best in Augusta County, which got a laugh. She gave her notice at the home health agency the following week. Her supervisor, a woman named Terry who had known her for 8 years, held her for a long time in the doorway before she let her go. "You made the right decision," Terry said. "You made all the right decisions." "I made some right ones," Dora May said. "I'm still working on the rest." That spring, Dora May bought the house on Elm Street. Not the house she was renting. The house she and Calvin had talked about buying, the brick one on the corner 3 blocks over with the wide front porch and the pecan tree in the backyard and the kitchen with 2 ovens that he had driven past twice on their way home from church in the last year of his life and said, "Someday, the way people say things when they mean it and aren't ready yet." She paid cash, which was a sentence she had never expected to say about a piece of real estate and which she practiced saying quietly in the car on the way to the closing. Not to brag, but to make it real. She did it on a Wednesday morning in late March, sitting at a table in a real estate office on State Street with Renee on one side of her and Vonda on the phone on speaker. The agent, a man named Walter who had shown her the house twice before in years when buying it was not possible, did not say anything when she put the cashier's check on the table. He looked at it for a moment and then he shook her hand with both of his hands, which was not something he usually did, and said, "Congratulations," with a gentleness that surprised her. She drove past the old house on Elm Street on her way home. The porch where the folding table had been was bare. She had taken the table with her because it was Calvin's and it was hers, and she intended to set it up on the new porch on the corner, though she had not yet decided whether she would put the sign back out or not. Maybe for a little while, maybe until the neighborhood found her again. People always found the pie. The first pie she baked in that kitchen, she baked alone on a Sunday morning in April, 1 year after the first pie she had set on the folding table with the index card and the rock. She made it from the same recipe, the same handwritten card with her grandmother's looping cursive on the back of an electric bill from 1971. She set it to cool on the counter by the window that looked out over the backyard. The pecan tree was just starting to leaf. She stood there looking at it. She thought about Calvin. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about the $9 and the $5 bill and the rock, and about Renee's blue ink recording everything faithfully in the spiral notebook that Dora May still had not decided what to do with, because it seemed like something that should be kept, but she did not yet know where. She thought about Clem's shoes on the kitchen floor of the old house, and she looked down, and there they were on the floor of this kitchen too, because Clem had been present for the move-in, and had immediately established herself in the new space by leaving her sneakers in the middle of the kitchen floor the moment she took them off. Dora May stepped over them carefully. She cut herself a slice of pie. She sat down at the kitchen table in the house Calvin had pointed at from a car window and said someday, and she ate her breakfast in the early morning quiet while the pecan tree budded outside, and the spring light came through the window clean and yellow, and she was, for the first time in a very long time, still. Not the stillness of loss, not the stillness of holding yourself together, the stillness of a person who had arrived. And if you know what it is to give everything you have to keep something alive, long after the easy ways are gone, long after the hours are brutal and the rest is thin and no one is watching and no one is keeping score, then you know what she felt sitting at that table. You know it without being told. If you've ever done that for someone you love, leave a word below, because stories like hers deserve to be witnessed. And when you're ready, there's another one waiting for you here. Another story about a person who kept going when the world gave them every reason to stop, and what found them because of it. The pie cooled on the counter. The tree leafed outside the window. Clem came downstairs in socks and stopped at the bottom of the stairs and sniffed the air. "Mamma," she said, "did you make a pie?" Dora May looked at her youngest daughter in the morning light of the house they now owned and smiled. "I did," she said. "Can I have some?" "Sit down," Dora May said. "Go get your sisters." This story is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real persons or businesses is coincidental.